Illinois became a state in 1818, the old territorial capital at Kaskaskia continued to serve state government. However, the legislature moved the capital city to Vandalia in 1820. It was to remain the capital until 1840 when a new site would be chosen. The General Assembly jumped the gun in 1837 when it decided to pick a new site before 1840. Representative Abraham Lincoln became his prime mover to secure the capital at Springfield. On the 4th of July in 1837, the cornerstone was laid with Edward Dickinson Baker delivering the dedicatory address while standing on that stone. In style, the capital at Springfield is Greek Revival architecture, with Doric columns on the outside, Ionic columns on the first floor, and Corinthian, the highest order, on the second floor, where the legislature and the governor sat. This beautiful brownish stone used in its construction is dolomite, which was quarried just south of Springfield and dressed on the public square as needed. John Francis Ragu received the contract for its construction. His design called for a dome with walls 4 feet thick. Brick lined the stone on the inside. In the Supreme Court, Lawyer Lincoln appeared in 411 cases. Stephen A. Douglas sat on the bench here briefly in 1841 to 43 when he resigned to become a congressman. The office of the Supreme Court clerk in the law library. Originally, the clerk of the Supreme Court was elected and thus had his own room. However, on December 15, 1842, legal volumes were put into his room to form the law library. In this room, Lincoln often played chess with the judges and did legal research. The Treasurer's Office. One of the more famous occupants in this office was William Butler, who began here in 1859. He boarded Abraham Lincoln after Joshua Fry Speed left town for Kentucky. And during the Civil War, Camp Butler east of Springfield was named for him. The Auditor's Office. In this room, pay warrants and so forth were issued and cashed. At times, Abraham Lincoln walked in here to cash a warrant, sometimes as an accommodation to his friends out on the circuit. First auditor in this room was James Shields in 1841. He challenged Lincoln to a duel over political stories in the local newspaper. Called off at the last minute while on the dueling grounds at Bloody Island, Mississippi, the fight never came off. Illinois State Library. It was established on February 22, 1839 by law and opened on December 15, 1842. Lawyer Lincoln was the very first borrower from this library. Then on November 13, 1860, he checked out the 2 volumes entitled The Statesman's Manual to see what other presidents had said at their inaugurations. The Secretary of State's office. The first Secretary of State in this room was Stephen Arnold Douglas, who came here November 30, 1840. The next year, the legislature picked him as the Supreme Court judge, and he walked across the hall to that chamber. Among the duties of the Secretary of State was keeper of the Great Seal, compiling the House and Senate journals for publication, keeping the election returns, and so forth. The Senate. The Senate was the first room in the Capitol to receive gas lighting in 1855 after a local firm built a coal gas plant. By law, the incorporation stated that gas would be brought to the Capitol first. The fancy chandelier came from Boston and cost $1,000, a price which shocked Springfield residents. Hanging here is the oil painting of the Marquis de Lafayette by James W. Berry. Went to Washington and copied in oil the original painting of Lafayette by Harry Sheffer, which was put in the House of Representatives there in 1825. This copy in the Senate is the original one done by Berry and is one of the very few artifacts which is original to Illinois' old Capitol building. Governor's Reception Room. This room is one of the most accurate reconstructions since Henri Louvet sketched this room for publication in Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper on November 24, 1860. He came to draw it because Abraham Lincoln had been elected president. But Lincoln had used this room in the governor's private office, which adjoins it, from about May 19 until December 29, 1860, When he and his two secretaries moved into the Johnson Building on the northwest corner of 4th and Washington Streets, governor's private office. Abraham Lincoln also used this room, which connects to the governor's reception room. Note the bust of Lincoln on the stand. It was modeled from life by the talented sculptor from Cincinnati, Thomas Dow Jones, on Christmas Day in 1860, and convinced President-elect Lincoln to pose for him in his own rooms at the St. Nicholas Hotel, at the southeast corner of 4th and Jefferson Streets. It is perhaps the most accurate and beautiful of all the busts of Lincoln. The Wide Awake banner. For the election of 1860, many young Republicans organized themselves into paramilitary groups called the Wide Awakes, sang and yelled for Abraham Lincoln. Their slogan indicates that they intended to watch the polling places to watch illegal voters, thus pictures of the eyes on their banners. This one on the second floor, south side, is a rare original. The Lincoln campaign banner, also on the second floor, south side, is an original campaign banner from 1860, which features Abraham Lincoln and Hamilton. Such items are extremely rare since few were saved after the successful election of Lincoln and Hamilton. The portrait of Ulysses Simpson Grant, displayed on the wall outside the Adjutant General's office, is an original oil painting of U.S. Grant. It is placed there because Grant started his Civil War military career in the room next to it. The Adjutant General's office. Grant went to work just down the hall from the governor's office in the Adjutant General's room. Thus he began his Civil War career in this building. At last the governor found an opening for Grant and named him Colonel of the 21st Illinois Regiment, Illinois Volunteers, on June 26, 1861. There he marched on into eternal glory and honor. The office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Next to the governor's private office was a room for the Superintendent of Public Instruction, an office created by the legislature and in force February 28, 1854. This Superintendent of Public Instruction had control of all the common schools in Illinois. The Hall of the House of Representatives had been reconstructed very accurately since W. Waugh sketched it in 1865. One of the prominent features of this room is the large oil painting of George Washington by James William Barry, made his copy from the original by John Vanderbilt in the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington. Originally, both the Washington and the Lafayette were hung in the Hall of the House of Representatives in Springfield on January 27, 1841. However, the Senate later insisted that one of them be placed in their chamber. That is when the Lafayette was moved. Both are now displayed exactly as they were in Lincoln's day. On May 3 and 4, 1865, President Lincoln's casket was placed in the Hall of the House for the final viewing by the public before burial in Oak Ridge Cemetery. When the state of Illinois constructed the new Capitol on 2nd Street on the Mather property, it sold the old Capitol building to Sangamon County for a courthouse in 1876. In 1961, the state of Illinois purchased the old State House from Sangamon County for $975,000. Restoration began in 1966 and was finished on November 15, 1969 as a historical shrine and open to the public. Information on the old state capitol of Springfield, you should consult Sunderine Wilson Temple and Wayne C. Temple's book, Abraham Lincoln and Illinois' Fifth Capital, published by Mayhaven Publishing Company.